I just had so much energy just like surging up through me. Like I was shaking. There was so much adrenaline and joy and fear, the whole mix.
Wow.
But it just felt amazing.
Hello and welcome to Where the Living Room Used to Be, a podcast about Rhode Island's music scene. Hey everyone, it's James. On this episode, I sit down with Jen Long, a musician, activist, and designer based in Providence, Rhode Island. In our interview, we talk about the hurdles she's overcome to become a musician, what Girls Rock RI means to her, and how the Whale Guitar Project came about and what it's looking to achieve. Hope you enjoy the episode, and as always, please follow along on Facebook and Instagram at LivingRoomUTB for show flyers and more from Jen's time in music. Can you talk a little bit about where you grew up?
I grew up in Euclid, Ohio, which is the first suburb east of Cleveland along the lake.
Yeah, okay.
And I grew up, I'm one of 8 kids.
Wow, okay.
Which is something unusual these days.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the second oldest of 8. Went to Catholic schools and kind of flamed out really young.
What do you mean by that?
I had kids at 19 and 21.
Yeah.
And so my oldest will be 40 this year, and my youngest will be 37, I think.
Yeah,
something
okay.
like that. So I did a lot of bartending,
Mm-hmm.
and I did sign painting.
Mm-hmm.
I was a single parent for most of that time. As they started to get into school, I started going to Cuyahoga Community College in
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland and taking some art courses there.
Okay.
And my teacher said that, Mrs. Friedman, one of the most inspiring teachers I've ever had, she said that I should apply to Cleveland Institute of Art. And she helped me put together my portfolio. So I have a degree in industrial design. And when I graduated, I got a job at Fisher-Price. So I went from Cleveland to Buffalo.
Yeah.
So we moved along the Rust Belt.
Yeah.
And then in Buffalo is where I met Brian, my husband.
Mm-hmm.
Jablonski.
Yeah.
Brian Jablonski. And then after 3 years there, I received an offer from Hasbro to come out. And so I checked out Providence, and I was just like, what's not to like? This is awesome. And the ocean is here.
Yeah.
I have a very strong connection to, well, the ocean now. At the time, it was Lake Erie, large bodies of water.
Yeah.
I grew up on Lake Erie. So to actually come out to the actual ocean was just a dream. So, yeah.
And
we did
like
that.
roughly what year was that?
That was 1997.
Okay.
So we've been here 22 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian came out about 6 months later. And we've been in the house we own now for 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
But I didn't play music back then.
Okay. Yeah. I was gonna ask,
so the music story is all out. That's just the background that a lot of people don't know about me.
Mm-hmm.
Just because we live so much in the present, and people, my kids are grown and they just know me as Jen Long, designer or musician, whale guitar, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I've seen a lot of life.
Yeah. But was music like around when you were growing up?
No. So one of the things that I talk a lot about is the influence of TV and radio on playing music. Mm-hmm. Because there were musicians on both sides of my family. In my grandfather on my father's side, he was one of 17 kids.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. 11 of which survived childhood diseases, which were a huge deal back then. They grew up on a farm in Bucyrus, Ohio, and their family was actually the town musicians for the square dances. So they were the callers and the musicians.
Wow.
So there's deeply musical heritage on that side, but the advent of radio and television, people weren't teaching the generations to play music. Also, you could have, what I would hear is, I can have the best person in the world in my living room watching Ed Sullivan or whatever. Or curating your vinyl was the idea of mastery of music. It was like, I select the best musicians and I
like
play.
A DJ culture.
More of a curation culture than of an actual playing culture. And when you have 8 kids, if you get one kid an instrument and lessons, and then if everyone else wants to play, the level of expense is probably frightening. And I used to beg for instruments. I always wanted an auto harp. That was something I really wanted. I had seen June Carter. But also there was that Mill Valley, California song. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It was like a first grade teacher who wrote this song and played it, and kids were singing it. She played an auto harp. And I always wanted one of those, and could never get that. So it was this strong yearning and maybe something in my blood, but it just wasn't happening. So I missed out on that. And my mother's father played violin, sang, danced. His best friend when he was growing up was either, I get this confused, Gene Kelly or Danny Kaye. Somebody who went on and became a famous dancer, singer person. And so he used to sing and dance and roller skate and do all these things. And my mom had piano lessons and violin lessons and ballet lessons, and then hated it all. And I think maybe she was overscheduled or something. So when she had this crew of kids, she's like, no, you're not going to do those lessons. You know, you're not going to like it. So just some different cultural forces discouraging music from our,
but that's great that it kept with, it
was
its way through, I guess. So when did you start playing music?
Well, in my 30s, I'd been down to New Orleans a couple times because I have brothers and a sister who went to Tulane. And I got exposed to Zydeco. I just loved it. So Brian actually got me an accordion. And this was when we were in Buffalo. So I was in my mid-30s. I took some accordion lessons, and it's like Three Blind Mice and Camptown Races and all this stuff. I would take my lessons, but I really wanted to be able to write my own songs. Like I wasn't that interested in those songs.
You're playing like traditional accordion.
I'm like, well, how do we get to the Zydeco though? You know, like how do we get to...
and was it a full accordion, or were you playing a squeeze box? It was a full accordion.
Where Zydeco, a lot of Zydeco is squeeze box. But Buckwheat Zydeco plays full accordion, full piano accordion. And at that time, I was working my first corporate job, and it was just so demanding that it was very hard to keep up with it. So between that and having 2 teenage kids, I would take my lessons, but I never felt like I was really advancing along. And I still had this mindset that I had picked up culturally. I think being a natural was a big thing in my family too. Apparently my Uncle George, I also have this uncle who was a drummer. Oh, he never had a lesson. Like if you were good at this, you wouldn't need a lesson. Right? This whole natural thing. And so I was taking lessons, but I just had this built up thing thinking, you probably really had to learn this when you were a kid, and your only prodigies really learn how to play music. So but I did keep at it, and I still can play some accordion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that kind of led to other instruments?
Then we moved to Providence,
okay.
and I still took accordion lessons. I was taking them at Accordi in Pawtucket, and I actually took lessons from Alec Redfern. Alec Redfern would come over, and Alec was one of the first people who was like, look, you can write songs. And I couldn't even believe it. I was like, no way, like, that's like another kind of level of prodigy that can write songs or something. And he like insisted on like having me kind of consider myself a composer from the get-go. And I still didn't take the lessons very long. Again, I was like in this heavy corporate job, and it just seemed like every time I started to get somewhere, I would have to go to China, or I'd have to do all-nighters, or there's just so much pressure. And so I wasn't keeping up with it. I was also intimidated. I just had so much intimidation because I was also married to an amazing musician. So if you know anything about an accordion, your mistakes are loud, right? Yeah. You can't play those things softly. So you have to be daring enough to play it and make all the blunders. And I would just like, my own shoulders would just be going up to my ears. And I was so oversensitive about other people hearing me. I also wanted to sing, but the same thing. I was just like trapped in my own like insecurities and fear of being, just being ridiculous,
Okay. Like just by playing music in that way, like you felt.
I just had not found my voice and my confidence. And I had inner dialogue, inner voices that were just always telling me to stop it. Like you weren't meant to do this, or you had to start this when you were 5. You can't do that. They were voices from around me, and I heard these voices, and I'd internalized them. Yeah. And they were strong. And then being married to somebody who is such a natural, easy musician, but knowing that he started like in his early teens, and his parents got him bass lessons, and it had been something he had continually done, made me feel, or I thought, I could never, even approach it, really. So I just had a lot of like false, what do you call those, limitations? Limiting beliefs. I had a whole bag full of limiting beliefs. Yeah. So.
And what helped you get through that then? Was it people
Girls Rock, Rhode Island?
Oh yeah, Girls Rock?
Totally. So at 48, by now I'm 48, well, I had this heartbreaking thing happen. And what it was one of my best friends wanted to start a band. And it was the night I had introduced her to another friend of mine who they had never met before. And she said, I want to start a band. And the other one had barely begun to play guitar, was like, okay, let's be a band. I'm like, I want to be in a band. I think I could do it. Yeah. And I was like, I think maybe I could sing. And I had been hearing songs in my head. I've actually been hearing songs in my head since I was in my 20s. But somehow I would still dismiss it, and so I was like, I think I could maybe write songs. I think I could maybe sing, and I could learn keyboard. I'd had some accordion, and they're like, rock bands don't use keyboards. And these are women, mind you. Okay. Yeah. And this was just like my worst nightmare because I was just left out. And I tried to just kind of suck it up, and I would go to their shows and try to be supportive and stuff, but I was just like brokenhearted.
That you weren't allowed to be part of this band.
Yeah. I'm like, they're like, well, you might not like the kind of music anyway. And I'm like, I wouldn't even care. I just want to play. And I was really devastated by that. And then I just paid attention to that devastation. I'm like, if that hurts so badly, that's telling you something.
Yeah.
And what is it? And then those same two were like, sort of like in a consoling kind of way. We're like, well, maybe you should go to Girls Rock Rhode Island. They had gotten involved in it.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, this great program and they're going to have a ladies camp and whatever. So I went and I decided, since I'd already, they didn't do keyboards yet. So it was like, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, all right,
and
well.
What year was this? Do you remember?
This was 10 years ago. So it was 2009.
Yeah.
And I was in their very first ladies camp.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm like, all right, I want to do something that's going to help me write songs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll do guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I also wanted to sing.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked them if I could sing backups. And they were like, yeah, sure, just come on into the vocal class and yeah, you can work it out with your singer. And so it was amazing. They basically teach you a couple chords, but I couldn't even hold the chords at that time. I was able to manage to move one finger off and on a string because my fingers were so bloody from trying to make chords.
Yeah, it's rough.
It's really rough. Yeah, my fingers were so torn up. All I could do was hold something off and on. Mm-hmm. But it was enough, like if you, and the magic of being in a band, which I didn't understand from my earlier accordion experience where you're making all the music with the accordion. Mm-hmm. When you're in a band, you just have to do your parts and other people will be doing their parts. I didn't realize that's how it worked at all. And so I could focus on my little thing and I didn't have to do it the whole time. Mm-hmm. The thing about guitar that was so confusing to me was like, I'm like, how do you remember where you went for the different sounds? Like, you just have to find a couple chords to get started in, and then you start working around those, and slowly over time, you find your way around that guitar. Yeah. And I had the best teacher, Karen Orsi and Patty McGee were my teachers. Uh-huh. And then Karen would come over every Saturday and would still teach me. I would pay her, and then we would have guitar therapy. And, and anybody was welcome to come over with guitars and jam out in the basement, and we started to figure things out. And I wrote some songs, and eventually that band turned into SwampBirds. We tried to hold the band together from the rock camp, but the other people in the band just were not quite as driven as I was. Yeah. Like, I don't think whatever that unleashed in me wasn't as strong, or they had other commitments or whatever. Mm-hmm. But slowly, gradually, people started to come into my life who were more motivated. Yeah. And so that's how SwampBirds started. And it's always just been more of this group of, come in and play. You don't have to be great. You just have to have a good attitude. And we're all going to encourage each other and help each other grow. It's not like, oh, the best band, because we're by far not the best band you've ever heard.
No, you're good. You're a good
thank
band.
You.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. It's always just been about, hey, let's, if you want to meet and you want to develop some songs and learn how to write together and support each other, and not, there's just different styles of bands, and ours is all about being positive. So that's what it is.
Refreshing to hear,
Yeah, I know, because a lot of bands bicker. Yeah. It's like a bicker fest. Or
Please don't wake me, just let me sleep. Everything's better in my
it's been different people over time because, it's just life. At first we had Bronwyn Conakey, who wrote a number of the songs that are on our album, but she was going to Brown getting her PhD, and of course she graduated and had to take her postdoc job, which took her way out to Colorado. Mm-hmm. But she was cool with us continuing to develop the song, and she actually recorded it with us. So cool. She's singing on that album and playing guitar, and has always been cool with us playing those songs. So there's some beautiful songs she wrote. She's an amazing songwriter, and just a sweet, sweet soul. But she had to move on, and then we had Sue Metro. There was overlap with Sue Metro, who was playing lap steel. I don't know if you remember Sue.
I don't actually. No.
Yeah,
maybe I might have met her, but
she was from some pretty well-known bands in Boston. Just a very seasoned slide guitar player, who really, the sound of that first album, our only album, is Sue's slide guitar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Originally, we were the SwampBirds, which was, the idea was kind of like Lou Reed Goes to the Swamp.
Oh,
what did it sound like,
Yeah.
So that tells you a lot about what I like. I like Velvet Underground too, like country.
Yeah.
And I like all kinds of things. So it's a very open sound, whatever people want to bring to it.
Yeah. But Sue was the person that recorded the record, right?
Yes.
Where was that done?
2 Ears. We did it in our houses.
Oh, okay.
So Pedro Weinberg, who is our drummer, and he's now the longest standing member besides me.
Yeah.
So he was playing with when Sue and Bronwyn were playing in the band way back then.
Yeah.
So we recorded some of it at his house. We wired up his house. Sue was great at this stuff. Sue was a technician for Boston, for the band Boston.
Oh, okay.
She really knows what she's doing.
Yeah, nice.
And so she, would wire up the house, and
cool.
We had a blast. It was Pedro would bring oysters, and we would have these feasts and record. Cool. But the downside of that is it took a really long time to mix and master. Mm-hmm. It took well over 2 years. And that to me was like, I was dying. Oh my God. So I don't think I'll ever really do it that way again.
Yeah.
When we're ready to record again, we'll probably go into studio and just knock it out.
Try to do something in a couple days or a week or whatever, and then.
Which we've had a number of lovely experiences with both Machines with Magnets. They actually mastered it for us. Mm-hmm. Seth and Keith.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then we SwampBirds recorded with Kate Mick when she recorded her new album.
Yep.
So we experienced
And she did that at Machines or
no? What's it called?
Oh, Big Nice, right?
Big Nice, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
That was really fun. So we recorded, and then we also had Rochelle Rosencrantz was in our band for a little while. She was our upright bassist in the very beginning, but she left before we even recorded. She began getting really serious about building guitars and didn't have time to be in a project all the time.
Yeah.
So that's kind of SwampBird's story. We have Joanna Reed on bass, and I met her through Girls Rock. Actually, Sue Metro I met through Girls Rock. Rochelle Rosencrantz I met on a Whale Watch, but also Girls Rock.
Yeah.
She and Sue were together for a workshop. Rochelle was teaching people how to DJ, and Sue was teaching people how to take care of their guitars, like clean their jacks and rewire things and stuff. And I went to that, and that's how we met Sue. And we're like, oh, you want to be in a band? She was looking for a band to be in. Mm-hmm. So she started playing with us.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of Girls Rock. It just brought this whole community together.
It was the ladies' camp similar to Girls Rock, where you learn your parts, form a band, and then perform at the end of that.
Yeah, you don't have to have any experience. You learn an instrument. You kind of speed date a band together. Yeah. So they might have signs around the room that might say punk rock, garage rock, country, whatever. And
Yeah.
you kind of like go around in these little packs until you kind of suss a band together.
Yeah.
And what instrument you wanted to play.
Yeah.
So then you form this band, you barely learn your instrument. You learn enough to begin to write, but they right away tell you, just kind of like what Alec Redford was telling me, is like, think of yourself as a composer right away.
Yeah.
And give yourself the credit that you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let that door open.
Yeah.
Because you can. And, so you have lessons maybe in the morning, and then you have practice sessions in the afternoon over a long weekend. So you start on Friday morning, and they're also doing empowerment workshops in there, talking to you about the media and how women are downplayed, like our intelligence is downplayed, and or how we're expected to, dress certain ways, and how everybody thinks the woman coming in with the band is the girlfriend of one of the band members, not a serious musician, things like that. Just doing stuff to empower you. And, so you have your practices, and on that third day, by Sunday afternoon, you are performing a song that you wrote with your bandmates.
Mm-hmm.
They do give you a little songwriting seminar, like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You learn what a verse, a chorus, a bridge, an intro and an outro is. And a lot of people don't. I didn't know what those things were necessarily before that. And you perform it on a stage in front of a real audience. So we were at, I think it was at Jam Stage, maybe, where mine was, or it was at ASC 20 or something. And it's really scary, and you're like shaking.
Yeah.
And it's like, is it fear? Is it adrenaline? Or it's a combination of both, and you just have to do it. And then it's the most amazing, exhilarating thing I'd ever done. I was high for days. Like, I would replay back when people started to send clips, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that.
That's fantastic.
Fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic.
Baseball's on the cracks in that old brick wall. The waves below us crash and beckon our fall. Take me down to the water's edge. It's cold on inside his head. Wanna walk that bridge.
The woman who was our vocal teacher in Girls Rock was Chrissy Wolpert,
Oh, yeah.
who was starting the choir, the Assembly of Light Choir.
Yeah.
And she's like, I want you to be in my choir. And
Awesome.
so I've been in that choir now for 10 years. And that, if you really want to learn to sing, God, join a choir.
Mm-hmm.
Because every week she's reminding us about how we should breathe. And it's such a mysterious mechanism, the voice. But to have her constantly giving us little images and ways to think about it, gradually over time you start to get it.
Yeah.
And that's been just a real joy, and another wonderful community of women,
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about what Assembly of Light Choir is? Like, how many people are in it and what type of songs you're doing?
There's like 15 to 20 people in it. The songs generally are written by Chrissy.
Yeah.
So she's an amazing composer. I think she went to URI, either that or Rhode Island College. I can't remember which, but majored in vocal.
Mm-hmm.
And she is associated with the Body. She and Lee.
Yeah, okay.
So she was saying to Lee that she'd always wanted to do a choir, to start a choir. He's like, well, come on, do it. And he just totally encouraged her to do it.
Yeah.
And so she does these 6-part amazing songs that we sometimes sing with doom sludge metal band, The Body.
Yeah, you've
which
like
is
toured
amazing.
together, right?
What's that?
You've toured
Yes,
together.
we've toured
Yeah.
together with them. And it's just so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge of learning songs that are not related to words. Most of our songs are just tones. That's been a really great challenge because my singing, writing usually, and my memory of singing usually has much more to do with the words.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very verbal person, and sometimes when I read poems, I hear melodies just from reading them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the wellspring is the words.
Yeah.
But with this, there are no words.
Oh,
And
so she's just writing
Yeah.
tones, basically?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But their movements, she'll be like, now this part is where the army is coming out of the forest after defeat, or after seeming defeat, they're coming out of the forest. And this is where everyone's victorious and joyful, or this is you're returning home, and it's just feelings interpreted in sound. And to me, that's just like, so amazing, like my hair is standing on and talking about it, because it's like, how do you do that? It's incredible. So, and know where you are in it, in the time and all that. So it's been this whole other education and fascination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you always perform in a circle? Is that correct? Or
No,
you
don't
don't? Oh, okay.
perform in a
I guess the
circle.
time that I've seen you
Sometimes.
has been like that. So.
Yeah. Did you see us at the fort?
No, Will did talk about that. I've seen some videos like from when you were touring with The Body.
We usually, it's either a circle or a U.
Okay.
Because you want to kind of get that sound blending.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, it just depends on the space.
Yeah.
Will's was probably, Will Shafts plays Foreclosure in Warren. Tiny little space, and we sang with the audience in the middle of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I still hear from people about how amazing that experience was. Just to be flooded with sound all around you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in that case, we did have words. And that was a W.S. Merwin poem called Lark, which I had found.
Yeah.
And I was like, these words are amazing. These are perfect for the choir.
Cool.
Because the last lines are so beautiful. It's about being down in darkness and then coming out into the light. And the last lines are, I the shadow, sing I the light.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, oh my gosh. I sent it to her, and she had been working coincidentally on this other piece, and she's like, these words are perfect for this piece. And she hates writing words. So she incorporated these words into that.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. So we sang that there that night, and we've sung that a number of different places. I had also been encouraged to sing by a guy. I don't know. Do you know Elliot? Our friend Elliot Clapp? There's a whole other band story I don't know if you know about. Our friend Elliot came over with this little Game Boy. Mm-hmm. And this was when I was having this secret urge to sing, but was too intimidated to do it. Mm-hmm. And Elliot was like, Jen, sing into this box. Just sing something silly. And there were fish swimming by, and when you'd sing, it would be like a bubble of the fish, and the fish would swim around and come back again, and it would just loop it. And I think I sang something like "Ajiva" in French, that was my secret childhood word. Anyways, he's like, I like it, let's be in a band. I'm like, what? So he came over, and he would do this electronic stuff, and I would sing poetry, because I also love poetry, going back to art school. the
okay.
literature and poetry piece is huge with me. And so Friday nights, Elliot would come over, and then Brian joined in, and Vaughn Boone would come over, and it was just a jam every Friday. And I would basically open poetry books and sing into whatever mood they had set with whatever jam they were doing.
Yeah.
Or I would make things up, or I would sing my own poems that I'd written earlier in the week.
Yeah.
Or sing things from the newspaper or whatever. It was just like this crazy
like
jam thing.
Open source
thing. And that started just before I went to the girls' rock camp.
Okay.
And I think that was because Elliot knew I had been left out of that other thing, and he just came over with this thing and was curious, and friendly, and was like, well, let's try this.
Yeah.
So I kind of owe it to him that the beginning of the singing thing. And then so that was Cardboard Cannons, and we would actually do that live.
Yeah. Okay.
Did you ever see that?
I never saw it, but as I was kind of going, I saw you did some festivals and.
Yeah, we did some like Buzz Fests and Noise Fests and things like that. The thing is that I always looked at that as a sketchbook. So that was like sketchbook.
Yeah.
And we recorded every single thing we ever did. And if I found something that was even mildly interesting, I would post it on a website. Mm-hmm. And some of the SwampBirds songs are actually songs that were born in that.
Oh.
So in that album, the songs Let Me Pretend and Double Drowning, and there's some songs that were poems by W.S. Merwin and T.S. Eliot. Mm-hmm. That's all from Cardboard Cannons, because I opened a book and it was T.S. Eliot, his poem Virginia, and it just perfectly fit the melody or the sound that was going on, and I would start to hear a melody in my head and I would just sing it. And I was like, that was pretty good. And then we brought it into SwampBirds, and you make it totally sound different rather than electronic. It sounded more swampy.
Yeah. That's cool.
I miss it so much. I really miss that. I'd like for us to do that again sometime. There was something so I was not afraid to get on stage, approach the stage, begin to play, but at some point, something would start tremoring.
Oh, okay.
So it could be my hand, like a girl's rock, it could be my leg, or my mouth would just dry up. So I think it was adrenaline, like my lips would be stuck to my teeth and my tongue would be stuck to the top of my mouth. Yeah. And I would be like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? But you just get through it. Mm-hmm. And the only way to get through it is to get through it. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, maybe after, 50 times of doing that, all of a sudden, like now when I play, my mouth never dries up. Occasionally I still get a tremor, but it's pretty rare now. Okay. And you just kind of have to work that stuff out of it. It's like adrenaline management.
I would have never known.
That's what people say. So apparently I have some kind of stage presence that you don't see that.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of inner battles going on up there. Yeah. But there was something bigger overriding it that just loves to be in this body, in this existence, in this world, playing music.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful. I mean, it's, knowing you, as I said, over the, couple of years, I just wouldn't have put together that your backstory here. You know, like I look at you as just such a just strong, powerful force in the Rhode Island music scene.
Wow,
And I wouldn't have looked at like, oh, that's Jen that had to, go through all these other hurdles to get to where she is.
Are you listening, Girls Rock and Elliot and Brian? Thank you. Thank you, and thank them for all the support.
But with regard to Wales.
Ah, yes, with regard to Wales. That's a great title. Maybe that'll be the title of my new book. With regard to Wales.
Can you talk about the whale guitar?
Sure. So the whale guitar is kind of the combination of all those things. I also, way back in my Cleveland days, I've had a fascination with the book Moby Dick. And I had been trying to read it for years, and weird things would happen. Like my apartment bust a pipe from the laundry room, and it flooded one book that I had started to read. Another book I had started to read started over in the middle, like it was not bound correctly. It was one of those weird mistakes.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm like, so I had a number of strange things like that, where that process of trying to read this book, just like process of trying to read music or whatever, lots of interruptions or blockades, Then I moved out here. I'm like, I'm going to try to read this book one more freaking time. So I picked up a copy, and we were like in Provincetown or something when I bought this copy. And I started reading it, and I finally finished it. And by then, I was playing in SwampBirds, and Brian, my husband, is an avid guitar collector. And he walks to the door, and he's like, I just got this crazy guitar. Look at this thing. And it's this Japanese Yamaha guitar. It's blue. It's got a white pickguard, and it's got the kind of headstock where all the tuning pegs are along the top on one side. And I looked at it, and Bronwyn was in the room with us, and she said, your eyes rolled back in your head, and I saw the whole thing. Like, the body was the whale, and the headstock was the whaling boat, and the tuning pegs were the heads of the whalers, and the guitar strings were the harpoons into the whale. And I'm like, I just had the craziest thing happen. And I do think it's because I'd had guitars in my hand, and that makes an impression in your brain. And I also am a transformative thinker. I mean, I'm somebody will say, I need a 1999 toy that for babies age 3 months to 6 months, and then I have to think of something. So I'm a creative. That's what I've been paid to do all my life. So it just transformed. I'm like, well, that was interesting. And I did a little sketch, but because I'd been designing toys for so long, it just kept coming out cute. And I'm like, it's not supposed to be cute. It's supposed to be ferocious and iconic. And I had met Will Schaff through the choir. And so when I had this vision, I had that in storage, and I'm like, let's see if Will would be interested in helping me bring this to life.
Yeah.
So I called him, and he was like, well, write it out, what you want, Yeah. And so I did. And I'm like, I don't know, the guitar's a whale, and the headstock's the boat, and Ahab, is it going to be on the front? And I'm like, is this cool or is this Velveeta? And he's like, Miss Jen, and he always called me, he calls everyone with a miss, Miss Jen, I've always wanted to design a guitar. And he's like, I think it's cool. Let's do it. Nice. And I'm like, wow. So I commissioned him.
Yeah. And what year was this? Do you remember?
I think it's 2013.
Okay.
I think it was completed in 2014. So it's 5 years old now.
Yeah.
Which is a whaling voyage.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's another topic we'll talk about. But, so he laid it out. Meanwhile, Rochelle was still in my band, Rochelle Rosencrantz. And she was leaving her job as an industrial designer to become a luthier. She had been taking lessons at Shady Lay in North Kingstown,
Okay.
learning how to build guitars.
Wow.
So I showed her the sketch. I'm like, what do you think of this? Is this cool or is this Velveeta?
Mhm. Yeah.
She's like, it's cool. I love it. Let's make it.
Yeah.
So I commissioned Rochelle and I commissioned Will. It was one of the first guitars she ever made and probably one of the last electric guitars.
Mhm.
She is now really well known for these amazing acoustics she builds. So she doesn't always want me to talk about the whale guitar because she's, it's tightly branded in terms of acoustics and stuff
Okay.
like that. So, but I think she did the most amazing job between the two of them.
Mhm.
His drawing and the way she carved it out, it's just so beautiful and people
Mhm.
just drop when they see that.
Mhm.
How it, even in photographs, it's beautiful, but not when you see it in real life.
Yeah.
It's just so much more, and people are just stunned by it all the time.
And what's the mission behind the guitar?
So as the guitar was being made, I didn't really know what its mission was, and I just knew there was something there.
Mhm.
And as an industrial designer, I'd been thinking for a long time about the impact of like all the plastic that I was making. Ultimately, like
Mhm.
what's happening to all this stuff, and I was growing more and more concerned about the environment. And I'd been moving towards alignment with my values. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I knew that I wanted to shift. I knew toys up, down, and sideways, but I wasn't feeling like it was what I should be doing for the rest of my life.
Mhm.
And so I'd been, I don't know, asking my higher power, whatever you want to call it, like, well, what is next for me?
Mhm.
I have these abilities and I want to use them for a further purpose,
Mhm.
And so as the guitar was being built, it began to occur to me that, this story, Moby Dick, was really a metaphor about the environment. Many people have many metaphors of what the meaning of Moby Dick is all about, but I began to see that the whale could represent nature and the force of nature rising up against unnecessary provocation.
Mhm.
So Ahab, this madman who kept provoking this white whale for revenge and ego purposes, and he was willing to put his entire crew at peril.
Mhm.
He wasn't really out there hunting whales for oil at all. He didn't care about that at all. They did hunt a few for oil, but really he just wanted that white whale.
Mhm.
So he put his entire crew at peril. He also imperiled the fortunes of his investors. There was a lot of money invested in that ship, and he could care less.
Yeah.
It was all about getting this whale, which he saw as the personification of all evil, and if he could kill that, he could kill evil. But he had clearly gone mad.
Mhm.
It's also about Starbuck. So we have mad leadership, basically. And we have a force of nature. We're provoking by following the mad leadership, which is Ahab. We're just the schmucks in the boat, basically just trying to do our jobs and make a living. But our whole economic system, the tie lines to that, which are the guitar strings tying you back to that leader,
Yeah.
is based on something that's not sustainable and something that's provoking nature, something that's exploiting nature. And nature is starting to turn and rise against us.
Yeah.
Then the strap bears the words of Starbuck, when Starbuck realized that the captain was mad and he tried to reason with him. And some mad leaders don't take reason very
At all.
at all. So reason's kind of like science,
Mhm.
And he said, "Oh, Ahab, not too late is it even now, the third day to desist." And that's what's embroidered on the strap. So the third day has religious connotations. It's where you either sink or rise. And so that's where we are today. So whale guitar is about where we are today. that's what the mission is. And I was just reading this book about Greta Thunberg,
Oh yeah.
and she has a little blurb which I'm going to put in this office, and it talks about what she calls cathedral design. And that's when they began building cathedrals, they didn't know what it was going to end up being. Even like the Gaudi one that's still being built, you start with something of an idea, and you get, the mission becomes clearer as you build upward. And that's sort of how the whale guitar was. I didn't know what this was when it started, and I still don't completely know. Although I do know it's been a whaler's journey by now in time. So I am, part of the reason I'm in this office is because now I want to focus in on the next phase for this guitar, which is actually to be auctioned. This is a really interesting guitar. It's a one of a kind guitar, and it has been played and signed by hundreds of guitarists.
Yeah. I guess can you talk a little bit more of like how has it been used over these,
these five years,
and has it been used to bring awareness to these issues during shows and stuff? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So the idea, as it kind of evolved, at first I actually thought the guitar was about saving whales, and then I realized we were in much thicker waters. Like whales, it's really important to save whales, but climate, if we can save whales from hunters, but if climate changes too much, it's bigger than hunters. I began to realize that, well, maybe I could take this guitar around and get it signed by different, played and signed, and that its value might increase with certain signatures, and that someday it would be auctioned for climate action, but also during the time that it's out being signed. And by out being signed, I mean I'll just show up with it somewhere and pop up with it. For example, we snuck it into Newport Folk Fest and brought it backstage where Jay Mascis was, and he played and signed it.
Yeah.
And then that led to it being invited to the Bowery in New York for his 50th birthday and the 30th anniversary of Dinosaur Jr. And then it got signed by Bob Mould and Lee Ronaldo and Kim Gordon and Henry Rollins and so many amazing, Jenny Lewis. I mean, that was just incredible. Maybe it could have stopped there. I don't know. But I kept going with it. It's been played by around 200 people, a ton of local Providence people, because I think it's also very special for Providence. It sprung up here. It's really speaks of the creative collider that Providence is, that if you dare to do something, even if it's kind of wacky or you don't know where it's leading, you find yourself enmeshed with people who are interested in it and will help you if it's a worthy cause, you know. So people have loved to play it and sign it. Yeah. So I just will show up places with it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. So I think this last year I'll be trying to get a few more, I mean, one of my big dreams, of course, is some of my very early rock influences, which would be Neil Young. Neil Young, if you're out there listening, please play the whale guitar.
Yeah.
I think you'd love it. I'd love for Slater Kinney people to play it, because they started Girls Rock Rhode Island, which led to this whole thing.
Yeah.
So Carrie Bronstein, if you're out there and you hear this, please play the whale guitar. I even photoshopped her playing it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
did you send it to her and say, this could really be you?
I have yet to learn what the trick is to actually, get the attention of people at that level.
Yeah.
I haven't really learned that yet.
Yeah, but it seems like just the concept of what you're doing resonates with a lot of people. And I know it does with me. I'm not a guitarist, but I just like what you're doing. I think that what makes the Whale Guitar Project really interesting to me is that you're taking this very critical problem that we have, and getting it out to a community that isn't always, I mean, they're open to things, but it's also, can be probably argued that there's like too much that is going on, but this is like a new way to actually be hands-on, like what you're saying with sort of this guerrilla style, like just showing up with a guitar, like this is now here's this other message, that it's a lot different than here's another like well-designed flyer that's going to tell you what the problem is and have this, how you can make that change. Like the pictures that I've seen of people playing the guitar, they seem like legitimately interested in the whole story that you just said of how it was designed by this, this artist and made by hand and all these other things. It seems that they're like interested in that, and then that can kind of spur that message even farther forward. And,
wow, thank you. It's always good for me to hear that whenever you do something like this, and coming from my background, where there was so much doubt about your right to even be a musician, right? We're all supposed to be, nurses or something very practical from where I came from, and so I don't know, it's just so good to hear like affirmation and recognition of the value of what this brings, and not only that, but that kind of handmade DIY kind of way that it's being done, because it is that. It's not a slick thing. It's not glossy by any means. It's just me and whatever energy I have to throw at it.
With that, I guess, what would you say is your greatest musical accomplishment?
I think it was giving myself permission to learn to play music as an adult. Remember when I was saying I was looking for how was I going to shift from my toy design work to something more aligned with my values? When I left the corporate world, I named my business Pivotal Design with the intentions that I would shift into green design. And at that time, this was 12 years ago, I would go to conferences like Better World for Design and things like that, trying to like absorb information about what I needed to do to shift from this like plastic heavy industry. Even though at that time I still didn't really understand the level of plastic issues. And at some point I got frustrated with that because it seemed like every material had its own set of issues, and I was so educated in like how to do vacuum molding and things like that all these new processes, maybe the learning curve was really tricky. But then something like said, it's okay. Don't try to save the world yet. Just follow this urge to learn how to play music. And I did. And then that led to this mission. So I think that was my greatest musical accomplishment, was trusting that voice that said, back off, you worked really hard all these years, like going to school as an adult with kids and getting corporate jobs and moving away from home, and you did all these really hard things, and now you're trying to do this other hard thing. Like, what did you miss in all that? It was music. Give yourself that for a little while and see what happens. Don't try to design this whole thing. Let it, this cathedral model, take some steps, and then maybe the picture will start to form. So I did that. I think that is the greatest accomplishment, because then the whale guitar, it's become clear the shift. And I'm now doing things like branding. I just did for the Secretary of State and Rhode Island Council of Humanities. They are launching programming around the 19th Amendment, which in 1920, women were finally, it's not right to say given the right to vote, because actually they were always citizens, they always had the right, but they were blocked by the culture, the male-dominated culture.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1920, the last state finally ratified, that was Tennessee, ratified the protection of the right for women to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And so women finally were allowed to vote without getting thrown in jail or any other barricades. And this is fraught. This is also fraught with racism, because black women really didn't get their rights protected well until the 60s, even though the 15th Amendment is about not being blocked from voting based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. But people were very wily and sneaky and pulled taxes and all kinds of things to block African Americans and people of color and Native Americans and Asian Americans from voting.
Mm-hmm.
So African Americans really didn't get their vote until the 60s, till the Voting Protections Right Act. So there was a call for people to do a design to tie this commemoration piece together, and I did that. And that's where I'm now shifting. I designed my last toy over 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been for 2 years trying to figure out, all right, well, what am I doing now? I don't know. But it's becoming clear. Mm-hmm. And so taking this, it's like food, right? You have to eat. And the music for me was nourishment that I really needed. And now I'm able to shift my life. Now I can figure out what it is I'm really supposed to be doing. So that would be it.
That's awesome, Jen.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for your interest in inviting me to do this. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Jane.